Hey, what's up, everybody? Got Glenn and Jared. We're here with Redacted Podcast, and we're in season one, final episode number 10. Really appreciate everybody that's been with us through all 10 episodes, with the varied release dates and the weeks where we had tons to talk about, and other weeks where we probably could have taken a nap on stream for an hour if we really wanted to. But today, again, we have a decent continuation of some of the topics from last week with the Battlefield 2042 beta wrapping up and where that's going. We've got some other games that we want to chat about that are from major pieces of IP that we didn't even know existed until the day before they're supposed to launch and then get delayed. And then we'll chat a little bit about what to expect when we have season two coming up here in a month or two once we get resettled and lay this down. So, Jared, what's cooking in your mind as we get into episode 10 here?
So I guess we could talk about Ghost Recon Frontline and how it's this 100-player battle royale that was supposed to be coming out. I think as of today was when the playtest, if you got invited to play in it, it would start today. Now, yesterday, they announced over Twitter that they would not be releasing it tomorrow, or AKA today, and it would be delayed to a later date, which is unknown at this time. And we were talking before the stream started of we both had not seen anything on this until I had seen it maybe, I think like 2 days ago because somebody had mentioned it and I signed up for the playtest just on a whim to see if I could get into it. And the fact that it's a big IP with Ghost Recon slapped on it and we both are really delayed on hearing about this is pretty surprising.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where, again, I think both of you and I are pretty self-aware. So the fact that we missed something's not unheard of, but it's a Ghost Recon game. It's a battle royale. It's a shooter. It's inside of this general topic we keep coming back to every single week, which is we want something good in this space. And I mean, you just found out about it, through those different channels, and then here we are. I found out about it 15 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago. Interesting concept, that's for sure, but it's just weird. And then when we take that against some of the conversation we've had about Ubisoft and this rinse and repeat kind of cookie cutter IP that's getting, and I think wearing down a lot of people's ability to really enjoy these games with something like Ghost Recon, throwing Tom Clancy's name on it. I don't know. When I was watching some of the footage supposedly in game, it looks solid-ish. It looks like anything else. Definitely presents very closely to Warzone. That's it's definitely going up against that. I think it's odd though, kind of the same way you did, because it's not like taking an IP like Call of Duty, which just has both a campaign and a multiplayer, that are two distinctly different experiences, and then having the power of Call of Duty then go and create Warzone, which will remind everybody was not intended to be as successful that it was. I mean, obviously they're not going to do something that's not successful, but it blew everybody's mind, even at Activision. But with Ghost Recon, when you more think about it, there is a co-op or kind of multiplayer feel to it, but it's most known for having this deeper story, more along the lines of a modern warfare-esque Far Cry type experience when you put those two together. And so just slapping Ghost Recon skins on top of players and putting them into a battle royale, I'm not even 100% sure if I'd say it piques my interest or not. I'm just generally A, curious, and B, don't understand why it was delayed, other than the fact that maybe they're reading the pulse of the room and need a little bit of understanding of what the market's going to look like when the Vanguard version of Warzone comes out, and then when 2042 comes out with all its bizarre and different game modes.
Yeah, and you brought up some good points because with Warzone, I mean, we saw Blackout with, I think, Black Ops 4 that came out, and that wasn't nearly as successful as what we see with Warzone. So I think that was kind of the same vein when they came out with Warzone. They were expecting maybe similar feels of what Blackout would be, but then it just took the world by storm, especially the right timing, right place, right time. But one of the things I did is I looked on the Reddit of Ghost Recon to see what were people part of that community thinking. And a lot of people that were being, top rated comments on these posts, especially when they announced Frontline on there, people were saying, did we ask for this? Did anybody ask for a battle royale within the Ghost Recon space, especially in the same vein of a game like Wildlands or Breakpoint, because those games are very much based on that more tactical co-op experience. That was the reason I picked those games up, was because I knew I had friends that would be picking them up, so we could do that co-op story together, especially Breakpoint, where they're bringing in, you know, characters like John Bernthal to be a character within the game. So there's definitely that big story feel to it. So I'm curious what they're trying to do with Frontline, if it's just a, hey, we're doing a battle royale like everybody else is because we see potential in our community within Ghost Recon. And that's maybe what it kind of feels like, because, and from an outsider perspective, that's not necessarily dove into or into the Ghost Recon games for hundreds and hundreds of hours. It was mainly a pick up and casually play. It feels as though it's a quick kind of money grab where they want people to try and play a battle royale and maybe get in on the popularity of battle royales and maybe build on the Ghost Recon franchise as a whole. But it definitely feels very bizarre and kind of out of left field for a Ghost Recon game.
Yeah, I'm with you, and it's interesting because it could have a lot of potential. I mean, you slapped a Tom Clancy name on something. I mean, with all due respect to Clancy, I think that's even what Ubisoft's been challenged over the past years, is they're just throwing the name around at this point. And I'd be very open to an experience that really looks like Ghost Recon and even these more open world games. I think they could take on a Warzone directly by maintaining some of the integrity of the skin. So I think if we kind of compare to at least my observation, probably chief complaint with Warzone is over time it becomes less and less Warzone and more Fortnite, not from a game style, but from a visual perspective. You know, the wilder and more varied all the skins look, the wilder and more varied the in-game experiences can be, because it becomes further and further away from like this near life experience, which is what the game was when it launched in with Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2019. And Ghost Recon has the ability to stick with that in theory again and not have such a wild varying set of skins, but it does feel a bit like they are making some decisions possibly driven by the economics, where, and again, we're just going out on a limb here, if there is some understanding that their current model of, you know, rinse and repeat over and over in these experiences, whether it's with Assassin's Creed or it's with Far Cry or even with Division, I'd add that into it. If those are truly dropping off of their concern for the future, they do need to adjust to the expected economic models, and it's at the expense of you and I, or people that have played these things for a while. But you know, half of what you and I are talking about is this desire for these experiences that don't actually exist anymore. And so who knows? I mean, eventually somebody's going to stop listening to us. So, you know, maybe that's where this comes from, or it could be complete speculation where they're seeing the different modes and how Battlefield's being received by the community. They're seeing how Vanguard's being received, or heck, you know, some of the weapons from Vanguard that have been dropping into Warzone and the odd sets of feedback there. And they're saying, well, wait a second, you know, maybe we're not a direct one-to-one competitor with one or the other, but there's definitely a Venn diagram where there's a lot of player crossover. And I mean, we've talked about this before. You don't play more than one of these games. You invest in one of them and you leave the others until you get pissed off, because if you keep jumping around from game to game, especially if you're you know, a casual type of player, you're not going to improve. And if you don't improve, they're not fun.
Very true. And I've been jumping back into Warzone actually as of late. And one of the things that I saw in the most recent battle pass, if you buy the bundle, I think it's 2,400 COD points. It comes with teddy bear outfits where it's not like the full teddy bear, but the head is like a bunny or a teddy bear, and they have different colored ones. And I got killed by somebody wearing that. And I remember thinking, why? How is there a teddy bear running around and destroying me? And I know that goes back to a lot of the conversations we had before with, you know, like the skins and things like that. But yeah, that's a good point, that I think Breakpoint or the Ghost Recon experience could take things from Breakpoint, Wildlands, or even the Division, and kind of keep it within that vein where it feels in the Tom Clancy universe, and they could really run with everything within the Tom Clancy universe, everything from Rainbow Six to Ghost Recon to the Division. They have a lot that they could play with as far as development of characters or even just skins that you use. But as we're kind of talking about, I guess, Call of Duty and Warzone in general, did you see the Ricochet anti-cheat that was announced for Vanguard and the new Warzone map that's going to be dropping?
Yeah, it's they named it. It looks like it's an internal kernel based anti cheat. So just kind of speaking from the most simplistic terms, how it works is actually a part of your system. And when you launch, in this particular case, it's not a on boot kernel; it's a on launch of game. So essentially, when you launch Warzone, this particular process starts running in the background and it's scanning for different things. Um, to if anybody kind of the younger side of the audience that's been doing any sort of online classes and tests here in the past couple years, it's essentially that. So it's looking to make sure you don't have any other processes running or any other cheats running, and if they do, fire something back to the Ricochet mothership, and you get booted or banned. And the supposed upside is it makes it so if you get banned, you can't create another account again. But there's lots of workarounds, especially for ones that aren't boot based. So we can get that in a second. But what was your kind of initial reaction to how it was launched and even the messaging? I know that was just kind of weird,
Yeah,
really strange.
the messaging felt, and from what I saw with social media comments about what were people talking about when it came out, I saw people saying it almost feels like the initial message, the tweet or the email, whatever you saw, they were the same message. I happened to see it over email first, and it felt like the mother kind of scolding the player base that are hacking, like, hey, you better watch out because if you keep doing this, something bad's going to happen. And that's how a lot of people were kind of perceiving it is at least it's good. And it's a good system that I feel like it'll maybe deter a lot of people from wanting to hack, or maybe it'll ban a lot of hackers. But most of the people that are going to be doing that, in what we've kind of chatted about in previous podcasts, is human beings are really lazy by nature.
Mhm.
And I think this will nip in the bud if it does do what it's meant to do. The people that are just buying these software hacks and they're just loading it up and they're getting banned from this, then it's going to deter a lot of people. However, we know that there are some people that will go above and beyond and get some hardware based hacks where it basically disguises itself as a USB input, and it's hard
Yep.
to read that type of system. So I don't know the exact specifications of how that'll work with Ricochet, but my initial thoughts were, it feels like it's a good system that I'm happy they're at least showing it off a little bit, because they have to do that in some vein. It'd be nice for them to say nothing about it, and then when it launches, people are like, oh, cool, there's an anti-cheat. But that's not the day and age we live in. With the how big the hacking issue is in Warzone, they have to say something about it to the general population to say, hey, we have an anti-cheat. If you stop playing the game because of cheats, come back and play our game, because that's really what it comes down to for that marketing aspect as well.
Absolutely. No, there's a few things. I mean, one of the funny, I was like, I generally agree this is probably a good thing. Though I think it'll be humorous that when a lot of the pros suddenly don't have cheaters to blame for getting beamed, that'll be funny. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm looking forward to the Twitter arguments between the developer and the players when they're convinced this is a cheater. It's like, no, dude, get good. Come on.
Yeah.
So that's going to happen. I mean, that's just that's just part of it. And I think that's just all in good fun. But we were looking at some of the other kernel-based anti-cheats that are out there, and Vanguard was one that, even when it came out, was held in pretty high esteem, being kind of a competitor in the CS:GO market. And theirs, I believe, is boot-based, which means the moment you start up your PC, it's running, whether or not you're playing the game. There's pros and cons, and a lot of the kind of security element of our communities has varying opinions on that. I think to the average PC user, it's completely irrelevant, doesn't matter. There's all sorts of stuff running on your hardware that nobody cares about. But the workarounds are real interesting, kind of to your point about just having the anti-cheat, and the reality that most cheaters are just they're just lazy. And I don't even say that as a judgment; it's just kind of a matter of fact. And in some cases, I really can't blame people for that. But to get around, I mean, if you read some of these walkthroughs of how to get around the cheats, it's things like okay, when you launch this thing, you need to real quickly go in and edit this file and then launch this other thing, but it's a race to see which process processes first in Windows. And as long as it's the workaround, you're good, but then you need to do this other step and then you're in. And mind you, again, when people get good at that, they're good at it. But again, to your average person, that the alternative was they go to a website, pay a couple bucks for for a cheat that lasts for a day or a week or a month. That's all they're doing. It's not a huge particular process. But the other thing we're looking at, and I'm genuinely curious because I've always been fascinated about this in software development to begin with, is bounties. So Epic is real big on security, and I think it's because at their core they're a software company. Even though they make games, but they think about it in the context of the broader technology space, and you can get up to $100,000, and it kind of 175. There's different tiers for different types of hacks or exploits, and essentially what they're trying to do is give extra motivation to the white hat minded hacker to find something and share it, and you get monetary upside versus the black hat that's looking at a way to exploit information or usage of something. So the nice thing you kind of pointed out when we were talking about that is, at the very least, when that stuff exists, as long as there's transparent communication, as much as there should be with the broader community, it entices not just the crowdsourced ability to find some of these problems, it also kind of calms down the larger community of players to realize, hey, they do care, but they only have so much bandwidth to go solve everything. And in this particular case, one way to do it is to offer up cash to find people that can break stuff.
Exactly. And the I love that you said bandwidth. It really makes sense to open it up to the giant community. It's no different than when they release the game to a large community like a beta, and you're getting a play test for hundreds of thousands of people to really overload servers to try and break the game. That way people have an incentive to, not only are they getting a monetary gain, like for this case, for a beta case, you're just there to hopefully help the developers out in getting that game to be as solid as possible on launch. That's the idea behind that. But now think you're going to have a lot more people that are going to want to get involved in solving these issues for the companies in a giant community-based way, which is, like you said, releasing it out to the public, saying, hey, here's our code, break it for us, and then tell us how you broke it so that we can fix it, and here's money. That's a great way of keeping this community going, and it's a great way to show that, at least from a marketing standpoint, that they do care about this game and they want it to do well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, that's right. And it's just seeing what, again, what they come up with. So, it'll launch, and I mean, again, personally, I'm not really just 100% sure what my expectations were. I was not one that would go out of my way to complain about cheating. I saw it. I'm in there. Um, I'm not that good. Not as much money's on the line. Like, I can understand if like you're in a tournament and there's a cheater in that. That's really frustrating. If you're creating content across the course of 8 to 12 hour days, whatever. Like, I mean, either it makes funny content. I mean, half of these guys that we know have some of their best content is them complaining about cheaters. So it's like, what happens when the foil is suddenly gone, and that that thing that you can focus on forces you to actually focus on the game. Who knows? Maybe it creates a new dynamic. But looking at broader games too. I mean, I couldn't remember that they're like what the anti cheat is in Battlefield 2042, and there is some in there, but
Easy
I think the
anti-cheat, I
last
think.
what's that?
I think it's easy anti-cheat is what they use.
Yeah, I think it's one of the ones that's used by other stuff. But they really don't say anything, and it's talking about bans across platform. When you're found, you'll be instantly disconnected. Um, but I think there's kind of an odd thing at play there. So when you get banned on like CS:GO or something, or anything inside of the Steam area, the Valve, Valve games, it it lives inside of Valve. It's very, very encapsulated. It's in a box. It seems like it doesn't bleed out into the broader community. Where if somebody was to get banned, that happened in some cases, or get strikes against them for varying things in these other major competitive communities, just starts into this big fire about everything. And so, the other thing, and I'm sure this has been game plan behind the scenes from kind of a risk aversion perspective, but what happens when two scenarios. What happens when a non-cheater that's high profile gets dinged for cheating? A, because not only do you have to like right the wrong, you're gonna have to explain how that happened. Otherwise, it's gonna turn into the same nonsense that everybody get mad at Twitch about everything because it's like you presume the worst of it all. Or what happens when you end up with scenarios where people are actually cheating and not getting banned. Like and so much of it is subjective. So much of it is based upon a series of inputs or behaviors. And you and I've said like historically, how come they can't just check the people that have over 15 kill death and run a basic algorithm initially to check those and then check the remaining 1% by hand. But what if each took 15 minutes and there's thousands of people to review? That's a stupid use of time. It needs to be done automatically through AI and software driven approaches.
Yeah, and this just brought a random thought to my head in regards to those options that you were kind of talking about. So there was I can't remember if it was either Twitch or a Twitter user. I believe it was Twitch, and they were a partnered streamer or they were verified on Twitter, and their name was Squid Games. And this was before that show that took Netflix by storm had released. And the user was banned because of the use of the name, because I think they were trying to utilize that account for the actual show, and the account just got banned. Now, whether that be through an algorithm where they were just running it, anything pertaining to that way, whoever it was that wanted that name or the official show were able to have the official account name, that account was just the on the other side of the unfortunate side of the algorithm, or whether it was deliberately done. However, they got their account back because a bunch of people on Reddit and Twitter were retweeting it and pushing it to really get up in the ranks. That way people could see it. So there's things like that. But at the end of the day, right, what is the right answer? Is it running an algorithm? Is it people looking through? That's really up for debate. And it's up to, people that are getting paid to do those types of things for the company to make the decisions, rather than us just having conversations about it too. But like you said, we'll see what happens. End of the day, it's really what comes down to what they feel is important and how they plan on running Ricochet. Totally.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you too. I mean, right now, if we want to just look at kind of the pulse of what's happening in the Call of Duty and Warzone area, I'd lean more into the bigger eyebrow raise is the release of some of these Vanguard weapons into Warzone, and them having extra slot attachment slots for World War II weapons. And what is it, M1 Garand number one, I think it's just more funny. They've got like that 30 round drum that still makes a ping noise, which doesn't make any sense considering the actual ping comes from ejecting the the clip. So that's just funny, but it over time, that's where again that initial feel of these games deteriorates very quickly because to keep putting more content into it, but they don't want to reset it. But then it's like my curiosity with like the monetization curve over time is the person like me that went and dumped a admittedly stupid amount of money into 2019. Well, I did it less in Cold War because there was less. I started realizing, well, wait a second, these weapons are going to start going away. Like, yeah, you still use them, but they become pointless. And then now we're transitioning to the third major release with Vanguard. And aside, let's put aside the fact that it's weird seeing a World War II era game where you do have the ability to use any of the other weapons, but putting strange skins and them attempting to make sure that the meta leans towards these Vanguard weapons, which makes sense from a pure economic standpoint, it starts to break down the fabric of like any sense of story that exists, that's in the game, which is why, again, I come back to Fortnite, not as a way to put down Fortnite. Their model works for them, but I think every other game will devolve into Fortnite if given enough time, because it's just what you need is a playground to do whatever the heck you want, whenever the heck you want. And that's what Fortnite is. And, if it doesn't devolve into that during Vanguard and something like Warzone continues, it's going to happen the next one, but still then you run into also over time, if you're playing the Vanguard actual multiplayer, because that's another thing we saw was the stretch and pull between the Warzone community and the actual multiplayer. There's, there wasn't a gap between 2019 multiplayer and Warzone. There was a little bit of gap thematically between Cold War multiplayer and Cold War Warzone. But now you're getting a Vanguard. I mean, the Vanguard multiplayer is going to be completely different because you're going to be limited to the actual World War II skin. So who knows? Maybe what it does is actually shifts more people back into multiplayer. It keeps the Warzone players in Warzone. It keeps the actual multiplayer players that have been sitting on the fence and pulls them back into it. I don't know.
Yeah, I really believe that it's going to be one of the most bizarre things when you see Rambo running around in a
Yeah.
World War II map, and then other people are running around as like a World War II U.S. Army paratrooper, and then you have Ghost from Modern Warfare 2 running around. I think
Yeah.
that's
And
just
somebody
going to
else in the
be
bunny costume or with the teddy bear head or something.
exactly, and it makes it
Yeah.
feel like we've talked about this before, so we won't continue to beat the dead horse, but it is a weird concept because the rumored next game after Vanguard is supposed to be Modern Warfare 2, and it's supposed to be more like a Sicario based, in South
Yep.
America and Central America. So thinking about that long term, then is that you're having this Modern Warfare, then you have 1980s, then you have 1940s, then you're going back to the modern era. It just feels very weird and out of place, I guess, for the longevity of Warzone and how they're going to continue to keep that battle royale afloat. And is it going to become just a standard Fortnite, or are they going to release a new one, or are they going to do a flat line across? I don't know. I think it's going to be, like you said, I think everything has the potential to become Fortnite because of that monetary gain and the economics that are behind it. It's too easy for them to add things that are very relatable for people. So with Rambo, almost everybody knows who Rambo is. And
Yeah.
I saw that skin out like crazy when the game first launched, or when that first launched, that DLC. So it makes sense that people are going to want to play something that not only they relate to, but they want to embody that character as well. On top of, it's funny to get killed by somebody jumping around in a bunny costume, or it frustrates you when you get killed, I should say, when you get killed by somebody in a bunny costume. So I don't know what the longevity of that is, or how that looks, I guess, for the continuation of the battle royale, because I think ultimately maybe we're in the minority too, thinking about this, where people are just like, it's just Warzone, just play Warzone and have fun with it, whether you like it or
Yeah.
not. And I can totally see that perspective as well. Not that we don't see it that way. It's
Yeah.
just, I think the idea is that when we first played Modern Warfare 19 and then we played Warzone when it was just Modern Warfare, we felt encapsulated in that world. We felt involved and embodied in that world, compared to now it feels like it's taken a whole new life of its own compared
Yeah.
to what it used to be.
It's like the story. You're just in a place where it's in 2019. You could feel the story because it was a location. To be honest with you, I thought it was cool because it's these different locations from the history of Call of Duty. Which again, if we want to extrapolate this possibly in a positive, and that's why I think one other path is you almost slightly detach Warzone even more from the individual releases, and you just make it, it's Call of Duty world. That's what it is. I mean, and I think that's the thing where I get hung up is I believe story is so important, extremely important, and I believe a lot of other people do too. But there's a lot of games that certainly forego uh, like long tail story for kind of short injections. But if you were to say take Warzone and stop trying to back it into the current season of multiplayer or the current launch, be it Modern Warfare 2, Cold War, Vanguard, whatever, and just call it Call of Duty World. And maybe it's influenced by what the new launch is, by having the new skins from that thing. I'm happy to suspend all my disbelief and just again jump into Call of Duty World, which would look similar to the Battlefield. What the heck is it called? The Portal or whatever. It'd be kind of like that. It's like you have access to all this stuff, and it's the right platform or place to make it happen because I'm not trying to make it something that it's not. Whereas now, like you said, it's gonna be weird, and it makes it hard to say, well, how does the Warzone Vanguard map look like a World War II map, if that's even the direction they go? And then you're able to actually have all these other weird skins of varying other things. Like that, it just doesn't make sense. But too, we could be the minority that are getting, we're splitting hairs because that's how we like to play our games. And other people are like, I just want to shoot stuff.
Right, exactly. And what's interesting too is they do have a uh, Call of Duty Online, I believe is what it's called, and it's
Mhm.
a game that if I'm not mistaken, it's incredibly popular in Asia, where it is massive. And what it is it's basically the quote unquote best guns. I know that's subjective, but what they claim to be best guns and best maps from the Call of Duty universe. So you have
Mhm.
everything from Call of Duty 4 all the way to I want to say one of the I can't remember which Black Ops at the time, and they may be continuously updating it, but it's kind of similar to what Call of Duty Mobile is doing, where they're picking and pulling the specific maps and guns from the universe that they want to use, and then you can kind of play that across the board. And I
Yeah.
agree. I think that if games start to utilize that to their advantage, just as a whole, I think it would be fantastic. Like Portal has the potential for Battlefield to be Halo Forge for Battlefield, which could potentially be even bigger than the Halo universe, arguably, because most people, in my opinion, kind of what we talked about with New World, people like things that are very relatable. Now,
Yeah.
Halo is relatable because it's been a franchise for how long, but if you're taking somebody who's never played Halo before and then you're throwing Infinite at them with Forge, it might be a cool idea, but most people understand like, hey, this is an M4 or this is a pistol, and it's easy to understand and grasp that idea versus like the Covenant guns that you have that
Yeah.
are these laser guns that not very many people may pick up and say, I understand what this exactly does, as opposed to some of the weapon systems that you see in like the Battlefield universe. So that could potentially take a whole new life of its own. And if they were to spread that across the entire universe of Battlefield, and then I could constantly be taking everything over from every asset of every game and just kind of make whatever you want within Battlefield, that would be incredible. And I think it would be interesting for more development to kind of run that route. But then I've kind of talked about as well, looking at some sports games where they just do the Madden NFL or EA Sports NHL, and then they just release a new season and then updates to those every year. And then at some point, there's going to be an issue where you may have a new engine that gets released, and then they could release a new entire game. But at least it's, after a couple years, kind of like what Rainbow Six Siege did, where they had an HD or a high res pack that you could download and update to your game to make it,
Mhm.
bolster the graphics with the new graphics cards and systems that have been coming out. So I feel like I would like to see that just in the gaming world as a whole. I think go to more of this if they're doing these yearly releases or maybe every 2 year releases, that they keep something that is sustained across the board. That way it keeps people invested into that franchise because you have something that you already can relate to. Might as well
Mhm.
build off of that. And I think that's what we're seeing with Warzone. And we've already seen that with Fortnite. So maybe we'll see that in the future. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's something. I mean, I think about this too with hardware support for games, and Battlefield 2042 comes out, and it's still going to have support for PlayStation 4 and Series X. So the last gen. And I don't know if that. I mean, it's great, I guess, for the individual consumer, but I'm not sure if that's great for the big picture. Or we find out how long. Different Grand Theft Auto games were supported online. I mean, it's insane. And I think part of it kind of comes back to some of this entitlement, not good or bad. It's just a matter of fact in us, the player community, where when in the earlier days or even 10 plus years ago, our expectation was we'd go out and drop 40, 50, 60, $70 on something. Maybe if we got extra money from grandma, we'd get the $100, with the collectible statue from GameStop, but we expected it. We bought a lot less games. We probably still spent a similar amount of money, but we invested it in more areas. And some people say, well, the quality of games has dropped. That's why we don't do that. No, it's not true. I actually think it's the quality of games about the same to overall getting better, but there's just more stuff to spend our money on. And so we're more hesitant to go place a bet on a $60 game, even though you know what to expect from something from Ubisoft or EA or any of the big developers, but you do have all of these other alternatives, some of which are 19.99. You have the Insurgency Sandstorms or the soon to release, WW3, the World War III shooter. You've got You can go backwards and play Arma. Like there's all these different options, and we're just talking about one genre. And by having this cross generational hardware support, it's great for the ones that are lagging behind because then you're not contributing to that planned obsolescence of the hardware. But at some point, you got to move forward, and the consumer base has to realize they have to catch up. And I think that's a really delicate area there because your point about having that continuity between releases is huge, even if it was like a rolling every 2 years. So maybe FIFA 17 works through FIFA 18, but they need to upgrade for 19. But the business models behind development for these long-standing IPs that have been around since before the way games are transacted now, those are the ones having the issues. And they're also the games that we're bringing up through other challenges like the Assassin's Creeds and the Tom Clancy's, because those IPs have been around for a long time and they don't fit into not so much the quality of content expectation, but again, that continuity or what you're getting for what you pay for, even though, you complain about Assassin's Creed being a rinse and repeat. I don't know, paying $50 for a beautiful 3-hour trip through Odyssey, like compared to other things you pay $50 for, that might not be too bad. I don't know. But again, we look at things compare through a lot of different lenses.
Yeah, and I think that one thing that I know we've kind of touched on, but is it so much that we want something so different compared to what we've already experienced? That's what I think is tough. Like one thing that Assassin's Creed did well is that when, the first one came out, everyone was like, wow, this is groundbreaking. There hasn't been anything done like this before. And then two built off of that. And the stories were so rich within those games, which is why I think they stand the test of time even today. Like I'll go back and I'll play those games maybe every year and a half. I'll jump back into Assassin's Creed and Assassin's Creed 2 and play through like that little trilogy with Brotherhood and Revelations because
Hmm.
they're such good games and they have such good stories to them. But I think that obviously there came a point in time where the method of which the game was going about was getting old and they decided we're going to make a change. And I think that what we see is that because of how many games are coming out and the opportunities within the $20 threshold or the $60 or $80 threshold, there's so many options that, yeah, I couldn't agree more with you on that. It makes it hard, I think, for the gamer to really decide what game do I want to put my time and money into when there are so many options nowadays. And that's really tough. And one thing with the continuity that I thought of when you were talking about, investing in the older generation, I think that's why Cyberpunk 2077 had so many issues because they were stuck in the time where consoles were genuinely very hard to find. And so
Yeah.
they almost had to bet down like, hey, we will invest in the old console. But you can see what happened with that previous generation and how it struggled on there, where Sony is saying, hey, we'll allow refunds to happen within the store for, PlayStation 4 users if they aren't having a good experience, which totally makes sense. But it's one of those things where it makes you wonder at what point is the turning point for either developers or for Sony and Microsoft and these different consoles to continue support or to drop support for whether it be their games or their consoles and things like that. It really makes you wonder because also there's an investment there. Someone has spent their money on your game and on your product or whatever it is. And so does the development team or does the creator of the console feel an obligation to continue that support through some point? And that's what I think is the challenging point is like, at what point do you say, okay, we are not doing this for this console anymore, or we are pushing it past this graphics card. It is not going to work on this processor, things like that. I think that's a very challenging point. And we're starting to see that, I think, with Battlefield, some of the recommended specs are pretty high. Like I think they're anticipating or recommending a 3060, I think, at a minimum for the GPU.
Yeah.
So it tells you, what they're investing in, but it's the whole, I think, as we would say, maybe the casual gamer may find a struggle in that system that is kind of there today.
Absolutely. Well, and even when you look at using Battlefield as an example with support on last gen, when you look at cross-platform support, it's not including cross-platform, cross-gen. So you can't play Series X and the One X. It doesn't work that way. But I always wonder too, and using Cyberpunk is a great example of this, like what are developers thinking? Because it's a completely different set of code and how it processes and how you have to do troubleshooting and debugging. And it's not the best experience. It can't be. It's not possible. Um, and I think now the step up in things like power and graphics is getting to a point where it's a bigger break versus when I look at, say, the 360 stepping up into the the next gen. I remember on Battlefield 4, the main difference was the map size was capped, so the graphics were actually pretty on par. Like visual naked eye, yeah, there's difference, and at the time, I mean, what's like 720p was probably kind of the higher end of what you would expect. And so if I look at like a Shanghai map on 360 would be 3 capture points versus it was 5 on next one, and even like the destruction mechanics, they were different, but it was still essentially the same game. It was downsized, and so my curiosity is within something like Battlefield 2042. They have said that it's going to be less people, which that was that was actually another difference with the last one, but there's such a difference in power between these different systems, these different generations that I don't know. Are you shooting yourself in the foot by letting a series, or a 1X person um, play on the old console in exchange for them not having as great of an experience? Or do you put your foot down and say, well, yeah, we're going to make somebody upset, but at least we're giving people the best experience? Where if, Cyberpunk, and there was other market factors, obviously, and even testing and debugging factors, if they did the same thing, you might say alternative universe, they had a much better launch because they weren't trying to support these drastically different environments with a resource heavy game. So again, there's another one of these, and I find ourselves saying this a lot, and that's why it's also why we call the podcast redacted, and we're talking things about more topically. Is most of this stuff doesn't have one answer to it. There's 5, 6, 7, 8 different inputs, and we're always trying to show appreciation, obviously for the consumer because that's the side we sit on, but also show appreciation for all of that dynamics on the developer publisher that side of things, because nothing they do is that linear. I mean, their directive in a most basic sense is they need to be profitable, right? And I don't care whether you're a shareholder company or private company, you got to make money. You can't make games unless you're making money, unless you're cash positive and can pay for your staff. So beyond that, then it becomes, well, how do you do that in a way within the IP that you're working on? How do you do it with these long-standing IPs with, maybe they're reinvented? I don't know. And I know that was another one we threw under the bus a couple months ago with that Tom Clancy release that looked like some strange, um, you know, it was like garbagey looking. I mean, everybody looked like they were in some strange garbage outfits or trash people, and it to me made the Tom Clancy brand look bad. But really, I think why both of us look and think about this stuff is we're at a point where I'm willing to admit that I'm sometimes not the audience for things, and I want to give myself an excuse to not play something as opposed to holding on to it because I've played this piece of IP forever and I don't want to let go of it. Um, and the best way to understand it is to understand those motivations with the economics, oftentimes by the developers, and say, hey, you know what? It's okay. I've enjoyed this for 10 years, and now it's time to hand it off to the next people. And, maybe I check out the next release, but having that same expectation that the feels from, Assassin's Creed, the second one, are going to be the same as Valhalla is not going to happen. Even though Valhalla is way more beautiful, it's a walking simulator, and it doesn't have the rich story. And just even utilizing that one to by plays, like how Abstergo was woven into the story and why you're doing something, I think was as big of a drive as to how.
Yeah, man, that's a good point. I think that the gray area with which development sits, because we only get the black and white answers at the end of the day, we don't see the processes that they go through behind the scenes. Like, I know we've talked about that as far as like content creation goes, but when you're looking at it from a development standpoint, there are decisions that they're making that, we don't fathom, and things that we don't think about on a daily basis, but they are done for us That way we only have to pick, say, from a store perspective, I only have to pick if I want to buy this bundle or this bundle, as opposed to them going through multiple choice selection or putting things up on a board and having an idea just to go from the gray area down to, all right, we have these options finally. And that's just an example. Like, think of all the gameplay mechanics and decisions that they make on balancing things. It's, yeah, definitely tip your hat to the development team, because we obviously wouldn't have the games that we have right now if they're not doing that. And one point that I think I'd bring up too, just when we're talking about these different types of games that are finally coming out, you're seeing this gap being bridged now for console gaming, where you're seeing indie development being able to thrive on a console system because of the way that games update now, rather than even on previous gen when the first Xbox One dropped and PlayStation 4, it was still very much a you buy the disc and you physically use that disc to play your games. And then digital slowly started to make its way in, after a couple of years of the consoles being out. And I think that's where we're seeing an opportunity for these consoles to be more similar to that of a PC experience, where they can push out updates. You update the game before you start playing it, and it's good to go. And that's great, because console gaming is starting to get semi close as far as games available are becoming a lot more available for that console experience, which is great because it's also bridging that gap that, PC. One of the reasons I switched over to PC when it was before, grew up playing PC games, but then at one point there was a turning point. It was when the Xbox One came out. It was, do I buy the Xbox One or do I get a gaming PC? And I sided with getting a gaming PC because I liked the opportunity of the tactical first-person shooters that were only on only on PC at the time and not on console. And now we're seeing that gap being finally bridged between the two, especially with crossplay now being available. That I think it's just great that, at least we're having developers thinking, I think, a little bit more forward now, as opposed to just kind of going with somewhat of just, hey, this game released. Now we're kind of seeing a further push to connect the whole gaming community holistically. Now, the biggest issue is if they could just get NHL on PC, I'd be extremely happy. But
hey, no kidding, right? NHL's one of the ones that seems to still be as close though to its original as others, whereas Madden in particular, and then really MLB has gone off into mini game, booster pack madness where I don't even know what I'm looking at.
yeah.
I wanted to, but it just doesn't. It didn't make it didn't make a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Another new game. I think both of us were pretty thrilled at. It's been extremely well received. Certainly known that it was coming out. Was Back for Blood coming out from Turtle Rock, which got some love for them. I mean, Phil Robb, one of the studio heads and founders of Turtle Rock, has been a long time, fan and kind of friend of the community, which has been great. And then, they had Evolve was their last game they came out with, which I think it might even been ahead of its time. That was one of these kind of Monster Hunter things where one person's the monster and you've got like the squad of 4 people. It was one of those games that played out and showed really well at a lot of shows. I mean, it had a decent amount of player base, but I don't think like I said, I'll say it was a game ahead of its time. I think it would play out really well with the way the streamer community exists today. But they took the Left 4 Dead IP and kind of came out with this new approach to a first-person shooter. And I mean, talk about thus far. I mean, yeah, you can find some less than positive feedback, but for the most part, it's just across the board. It's a win. So, did you get a chance to peek at that one yet?
Yeah, so I actually played it yesterday, and 2 of the guys that I grew up playing the Left 4 Dead games with, we all jumped into it yesterday, and it was a blast. When I played the beta, I wasn't too thrilled about it, to be honest. I was kind of like, my expectations were really high because of how much love I have for Left 4 Dead. So when I played the beta, just kind of feeling the game out, I'm like, man, there's something about it. I can't put my finger on it, but I'm not the biggest fan. And that's something that obviously I know it's a beta. I went in knowing it's a beta, but it still gives you that presentation of what the game is going to be roughly like, right? So you still take that with you. But when the game fully launched and we started playing it yesterday, I was incredibly happy. I felt like a kid with my 2 buddies playing freaking Left 4 Dead again. We were playing on some hard difficulties, had some hilarious moments while we were playing it, and I have to tip my hat to Turtle Rock because it definitely feels like a similar Left 4 Dead experience with their own twist and being able to really put their own spin with the card system on there, with the PvP being some different types of PvP elements to it now. I can't say enough good things about it right now. I'm really really enjoying the time I have with the game. So
Yeah, I'm with you. And I mean, I've said it a few times. I'm typically not a big kind of zombie horror game type of person, but this one has some unique elements. And like I said, I'm a big fan of Turtle Rock and what they do, and the love they put into these games. And it very much squad based. I mean, I can see as well. I know why you went and grabbed your friends and played. It's not the same as dropping into Warzone. There's a little bit more to this, and I think it's just a good experience to have with others.
yeah, most definitely. And the fact that it makes it sufferable if you don't have a good teammate with you. And that's what I love
Yeah,
about those games with Left 4 Dead and with Back 4 Blood is that if you don't have good teammates, or if you don't have people that are communicating well together, you're gonna have a bad time. Just straight up, it's
yeah.
not a very good experience, and that's what makes this game, I think, stand out from a lot of games that have been coming out lately. Is that Left 4 Dead 2 came out, I think, 2009, if I'm not mistaken, was the last Left 4 Dead game we had, which granted, it has a community workshop where people were able to download mods if you were at least on Steam, which is awesome. It really can make the game last for literally as long as you want because of the amount of custom maps that people are releasing for that game. But with Back 4 Blood, just being able to have a rejuvenation within that type of series where, you have the four players that have to make their way from point A to point B, but the AI director who controls the zombies and the mutations and the madness behind it is incredibly unforgiving depending on the difficulty you're playing. And it's a challenging game. It's not something where it feels like, hey, I'm picking up this single player or this co-op experience and we might breeze through it like most of the games that you kind of feel.
Yep.
This game is very punishing and it's very rewarding when you do well. So it's a nice change of pace from a lot of things that are coming out right now.
That's awesome to hear. One more thing before we jump into talking about the future. I know with Battlefield 2042, both of us had some time to let our beta experiences marinate, find things to laugh about, think about, comment about. Um, and I went and did a deep dive on YouTube for glitches because that's my favorite part about Battlefield, and there was certainly plenty of them, and they're damn hilarious. But what as you've been thinking about it more, where do you stand on 2042, knowing it's coming out in about a month from now?
So I'm still excited for the game. However, I would say my excitement diminished after playing the beta. I would say still overall excited, but the total overall excitement is definitely dropped a little bit compared to when I played the beta. And I think it's mainly because, I really think my problem is that it's like everyone had this modern Battlefield expectation of it's going to be like Battlefield 4, but new graphics.
Hmm.
And jumping into that and it being, I guess, a little bit different compared to my personal expectations took the excitement down a bit, I would say. And that's the reasoning why. But overall, I mean, there were great things that came from it. And I loved the fact that the the style at which they're playing it, a lot of people may not like this, but Battlefield has its own movement speed. Battlefield has its own movement feel. If you played Battlefield 4, 1, and 5 in that order, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They've tweaked it a little bit here and there. And in this game, obviously they really boosted the movement speed up and they made it feel very similar to that of, I would argue, Warzone, to be more similar to that Call of Duty 19 experience, which is, whether you agree with it or not, I think is because of the size of the maps, they're working on that to really make it easier to traverse as an infantry
Hmm.
rather than having to rely on a vehicle because 64v64 is very big. But I I don't know. Overall, not to get into the weeds of it, and overall excited, but I really need to see what the full release has. And obviously, we saw Hazard Zone just released a
Hmm.
trailer as of today, and we kind of checked that out a little bit. But I'd like to hear your thoughts on the beta after marinating on it, as well as what your thoughts are on Hazard Zone.
Yeah. So I think my thoughts are I need to put a sign up that says stop playing betas. Um, because I'm with you. I'm still excited about it because it's the closest thing to what I think I want or need to play. Am I still disappointed there's no campaign? Yeah. Is the main reason why I'm personally buying Vanguard because there's a campaign? Also, yeah. Um, but I always wonder. I remember when I played the Battlefield 1 beta, I hated it. And yet, and I did not touch the game for its first probably 3 months of launch and then still put a few hundred hours into it. So that's what I don't, and I know the draw is it's the FOMO, it's the fear of missing out. It's having friends that are either creators or other players. And I feel like I need to have an opinion. Whereas waiting a month, like if I jumped in and had the same reactions to even being a beta in the actual release, I think I would be more optimistic if even because there's other maps to play. So I wouldn't have made most of my judgment calls based on this single map. And I think map was great from a technical standpoint, from the developer's point of view, to be able to get the type of feedback they needed. From the player point of view, was horrible. And that's where things like noticing the movement speed came in. You don't want, and lots of people have that one giant map, they remember this, but like Gulf of Oman situations where you feel like you're running around for 45 minutes doing nothing because you can't find a vehicle. The action keeps moving anywhere, and then suddenly Apache spots you in the sky and you get drilled that way. So I get a lot of that stuff. So again, I'm happy. And then with the new mode that came out, that's where I start to just, again, not a deterrent. I'm not going to go cancel my pre-order. None of that's necessary. Um, I just don't know. It kind of comes across as like Escape from Tarkov esque slash battle royale esque light. There's some weird things about the launch trailer with these satellites falling from the sky and you and grabbing things. I think I can put together what they're trying to do, maybe, but I don't know if it matters. But my wondering is inside of the Battlefield universe and the typical expectation for the Battlefield conquest player. Mind you, remember things like Rush used to be really, really popular, moving forward, and even how they implemented that in the in between modes of, 1 and 5 were unique and actually made sense for things like trench warfare. But having those type of modes or having this, Escape from Tarkov esque where, you're having to buy a certain amount of equipment to go in with this in-game currency that you earn while playing, which I'm sure you can buy it too with cash money. But and then you're losing your stuff, and it's not Battlefield anymore, at all. And I don't say that because again, I'm like the keeper of Battlefield, but that sounds to me like a totally standalone game. And my question slash concern is how much of the shared technical effort can be split between the more traditional Battlefield, Conquest, those type of things as we know and play, and this new mode. And then how is the player base going to act? Because it kind of comes down to if you look over, we look at similarities with like Call of Duty, there's a massive skill difference between someone who plays multiplayer and Warzone, massively different. And that's kind of the same thing with Battlefield, because Battlefield is like, even further down the spectrum of, you know, standard multiplayer FPS to a Warzone. The Battlefield's like another step in the other direction because it's wider. You have to pay more attention to your surroundings. And it took me a match or two even to remember that. But I'm curious how both of those games, I mean, again, their modes are managed in type of this universe when they're so fundamentally different. Is it going to split the player base? Is it going to split tech time? What's going to come of it?
Yeah, that's very good point, because if we don't see a big push in the multiplayer realm, then are people going to put all their money down on the Hazard Zone? Or is it going to be the other way around? Like maybe Hazard Zone isn't the way that they wanted it to be, similar to that of Firestorm with Battlefield 5, their battle royale, where
Yeah.
it seemed like it was a solid battle royale. Was it the best one? No, but I mean, it felt like it wasn't where they were putting all the eggs in the basket because they were relying on that multiplayer experience that the Battlefield community relies on. But so it almost felt like an addition added or tacked on to it. And even trying to play it today, it's hard to fill an entire match. I played one a couple months ago. I think I only
Mhm.
had 15 total people that were in a Firestorm lobby. So it
Oh
shows
wow.
you that it's not nearly the drive and determination of the Battlefield community, at least. Maybe it was something to do with the actual mode. I don't know. World War II, maybe. But overall, I think Hazard Zone will definitely be a big mode that will start off. And it's a matter of how will they continue to keep it moving forward. Because it could be something as similar as it's a new game mode. I want to try it out. I want to see what it's all about. And if it's good, it's going to hold a lot of people's attention, and that may detract from the multiplayer experience. And I'm curious from a developer standpoint, kind of like what you're talking about, is once the game actually launches, what are people's thoughts going to be within the development community of, okay, we can see we have this many people playing in multiplayer versus this many people in Hazard Zone. We have a significantly higher number in A or B. Are we going to put more time into, A or B, or is it going to be split equally for them to continue driving both of them forward? That's what I'm kind of curious about, because it felt like with Firestorm, it flopped right away and it wasn't as big, and therefore they put more of their eggs in the basket of the multiplayer classic Battlefield experience, which I'm totally fine with, by the way, because I agree with you. That is the Battlefield experience, is that multiplayer. So I'm okay with a Hazard Zone idea, because I think people that wanted an Escape from Tarkov experience, I think this would be a good game mode for them, because it seems like more of that, esque or light Escape from Tarkov light version where maybe it's a little easier to jump into. But I don't know, with Portal mode in there too. I'm curious what those 3 game modes all together will create for a holistic Battlefield experience.
Yeah, it is really interesting because the combo of those three, it's a roll of the dice to see where it goes, because Portal could pull a whole bunch of people in because of how it's a sandbox, but at the same time, yeah, I know the trend is towards user generated content and mods and whatnot, but I still am not convinced that that's what the average player wants. And statistics kind of prove that. I think that's a specific, more vocal, and not vocal because they run around like talking their heads off, but vocal because that's the part of the community they're in and they enjoy that stuff. Whereas the average, we keep referring to them as casual gamer. And I tend to identify with that, regardless of time spent gaming. But I still want the ability to, boot up my Xbox or my PC, jump into something that makes sense, have some fun, and walk away going, all right, that was cool. But even to your comments with the Escape from Tarkov, um, in the same way you had a bunch, we had the kind of the copycat battle royales along the way after PUBG. Yeah, Escape from Tarkov is going to end up being fine for what it's supposed to be, and there's still continuing hilarious drama in that. But I think it has more to do with the fact that the game's kind of capped in the what it can provide and how wide it can spread, because there's a major skill curve to it. Absolutely major. It is not a fun game, but it's a freaking hilarious fun game. But you can't just jump into it and play. You have to constantly hustle in that game to make it happen. And I'd be really curious if you just take that model and a AAA developer, you know, threw their weight behind taking the extra stuff off of it. The stuff that, yes, makes Escape from Tarkov probably more unique and deeper, but turn to something that's a lot more accessible, where you don't have to be playing for 6 hours a day to be better. And I think that could be. I think that might be one of those potential game modes that's sitting out there. But I also can't help but think you probably have these bigger developers and publishers looking at Escape from Tarkov and looking at the team behind that, going, okay, we still don't understand what is appealing enough to justify spending a bunch of money, because Escape from Tarkov's been in this perpetual pre-release mode. I know they're coming up on release, and it's almost like it just has to happen, and that's why. And I know there's a lot of hope behind what's going to come out of it, but I don't know if that's hope because it's like, okay, finally, or hope because it's actually well developed and well vetted as a game.
That's a very good point. I keep saying that after every time that you talk. I'm sorry, but like you keep bringing up these points that I haven't really thought of, because when you really think about it, right? Escape from Tarkov is a very niche community, because I think a lot of people look at it as, oh, it's a first person shooter, tactical realism. I want to try it out, because you have people maybe from the Arma community that were doing tactical realism and were playing mods like that and wanted something maybe a little different to try something out. But it's not meeting an expectation, or it's not meeting what people's thoughts are on the game, because it is really a grueling game to jump into. And if you don't have people to play with, it's even worse. It's such
Oh
a
gosh, yeah.
challenging experience, and one that you really need to really jump in, and you have to watch YouTube guides on it, because you won't know what you're doing if you don't
Yeah.
have either a person running you through how to do it, or you're watching guides to figure out what to do, or watching even, streamers like Pestily playing the game to figure out, okay, what is he doing that I'm doing wrong? Because I keep getting shot in the head when I'm running, from point A to point B. It's
Yeah.
not a game like, for example, like it's not an MMO similar to WoW, where WoW shows you this area is where you can kill this specific thing. It's not
Yeah.
telling you like, hey, Sanitar, one of the bosses, is located right here on Shoreline, so you need to go there. No, it's not. It's he has a possibility of spawning here, but it's not guaranteed every time
Yeah.
single time you're in raid. So there's things like that where, with the isms of the game, it's not a user friendly experience in my personal opinion, especially after putting, I think I have currently about 300 hours in the game. So it just shows you that even though I have that much time in the game, I'm still getting destroyed, like on
Yeah.
a regular basis. And I haven't played the game in a couple of weeks, because it's very unforgiving, and it's
Yeah.
sometimes it's a lot more fun for me to just pick up, Battlefield or Call of Duty, something that there's not nearly as much risk and anxiety driven gameplay. That
Yeah. Exactly.
I think that's exactly like you said, to say like why the point was good is because developers have to be looking at that and say, what is the pull here? And maybe it's the people that just love the feeling of pain constantly. I don't know, but
Hey, could be.
like,
It absolutely could be. That's what's so weird is like I installed it and I put a bunch of time into it, and I'm not fantastic at it. And mind you, like that was the first game I'd played keyboard and mouse. I'm still play controller on PC because I want to lean back in my chair and I just want to hold it in my lap, and that's not how keyboard and mouse work. But I didn't have a choice. It doesn't have controller support that actually makes sense.
mm,
And I like a lot of the elements, okay, where the hell am I and where do I need to go? I like the randomization of where stuff is. I like that there's this kind of, scav PMC mentality to a degree, but then there's a whole bunch of just kind of social stuff in it that's odd that you can't get around. Even the wiggling stuff is weird. But I get it. But you end up having to develop all the relationships inside of this game that almost plays like a quasi MMO in terms of its dynamics, but you can't build relationships in the game. You have to build them outside of the game in the community, and then you choose to go into the game together. And that's one of those, again, a dotted line to the MMO analogy you were doing there. Um, but then with, again, one of those strange dynamics that I don't think a AAA could get away with, um, especially since they would lean more towards the microtransactions, is the concept of wipes every X amount of time, and that was the realization that pushed myself and then my son, who was, he's my duo I'd always play with. Um, that's why we uninstalled it. Was we started thinking, wait a second, I don't have as much time to put in as all these people that are, killing me constantly. And there's ways around that. Like you said, less risk with playing other FPS. But if I'm trying to build up my bunker and there's a server wipe in 2 weeks, and I'm having a hard time just going in and getting actual kills or completing missions, like you literally have to ask, what am I doing? Because you need this good equipment to be successful in the actual game. And if you don't have enough time to play it, you can. So it's not, not only is it unforgiving, it's an extremely intensive game that has a learning curve that's, you probably should be playing it for a couple dozen hours a week at a minimum. And that makes sense because you look at even the lower level people in that community, they're still playing it for 4 6 whatever hours a day. And that's a kind of an impossible hurdle to get over for somebody that doesn't have that type of time to put in.
yeah, lots of time, lots of hours, lots of tears shed playing it. That's for sure. Just to figure out that there's more to it than you ever thought with the completion of everything, because the best time to play that game is when the fresh wipe starts, because everyone is
Yeah,
pretty much the same level, and that's when the most fun, in my opinion, that I've had the most fun, because you're
I
not
bet.
finding the Chad that literally has 10 million dollars that they're able to just dump into their character and they have the top armor and the best weapon system attachments that you could think of. And
Yeah.
you're trying to get headshots on them, and they have a helmet that your bullets aren't penetrating because
Yeah.
it's the top tier, helmet. So there's little isms within the game that really make it challenging. And that's what I think the wipe for me is, that the joy of being able to play at that level, but then it kind of fizzles out after a little bit. Definitely once you have those people that they continuously are playing the game, and maybe I'm not playing nearly as consistently. And that's what makes it challenging for myself to want to continue playing it, and for the broader community, I think, because you have the people that will play at wipe, and then the player base kind of drops off, and it's not nearly as consistent as it was, say, from level 1 to level 20 is usually what you see.
You kind of think about it, if everybody be the equivalent, if we all line up to go start a marathon, but you don't really understand the competition that's there, how in shape you are and compared to everybody else. And you sprint, and after the first mile, you see where you're at in relation to everybody, and you're like, okay, well, I'm ahead of a few. And then it's like you keep going, and depending upon how many people are ahead of you is what you're like, no, I'm not running this marathon anymore. But it's why I also wonder if dynamics like how, WoW and even other games on the PvP side gate levels. So, and you have the ability to have more of an open situation, or everybody's, even in something. But you couldn't do even, because that wouldn't make sense, because that would negate the finding of weapons. But it's like, what if there was this rolling tier, almost like a skill based matchmaking, where maybe it's not as simple as like, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, whatever, but it's more like, 1 to 5 could be with people that are, 3 to 10 could be, and it's everything kind of rolls over itself. Now you need a pretty large player base to make that happen, and maybe there's a default that says if you're queuing to hop in and it doesn't find people in that tier, you can have the option to back out or re-queue at a higher one, and maybe if you survive, you get some bonus. Because I think there's a huge, like, there should be more of a benefit to, if you were able to go kill that high level person, which is possible, and you can go steal their stuff. But the idea of you stealing their stuff and actually extracting, that's like two completely different games right there. Like, killing them is one game. Great, you did that. All right, well, I want their stuff so I can actually go use it. But the chances of you actually getting it and then getting out in that scenario is like near zero. And I think one way around that again, I think a AAA would think through, is tiering that, because the lowest level and the highest level should not be in the same instance. It doesn't make any sense. And it's actually not in the best interest of the developer from a longevity perspective, because that gives too high of an ability for that new player to have a terrible experience the first, second, fourth, third, fourth time they log in, versus the argument, I'm being super simplistic with just the skills based matchmaking, is over the course of a very small set of matches, it's supposed to guarantee you have a good match, because it's all you need. Let's get real, man. You could get destroyed 3 times, let's call it 15-minute matches or something. You could get destroyed 2, 3, maybe 4, as long as that next one makes up for it. You end up with that, that KD of 4, you end up with 18 kills and, 4 deaths or something. That helps, even if the next one after that's terrible. But it's because that's that whole, like, I just need a little bit of instant gratification. But it felt like EFT constantly, it's the opposite. There is no gratification. That's the whole point of the game.
Very true. It is.
Yeah.
And the community around that can sometimes be pretty brutal on itself, because anybody who's coming into the game may have these ideas where there could be the player base that is more on the like pick up and play, which is a lot more what I've been doing lately. I've been playing maybe one night a week, and that's about it. I haven't been playing it nearly as consistently. And that the community could just turn around and say, well, just get good, get better, play the game more. But longevity terms, like you said, that's not going to help the development or the player base within the game. It's just going to breed these are the type of players that play the game, and it's only these type of players that will play this game, is if they're either completely comfortable with getting just schwacked on a daily basis and not having those little victories that we talked about, or having a experience where you are playing the game literally all the time and you are just destroying every single person that's playing the game, or you get somebody who's on par with you because it's that, that almost that roller coaster where you have on one side of that bell curve, the
Yeah.
majority of those people obviously are going to be the higher level. It's a minute, smaller amount of people compared to the majority of the people that are probably playing the game. And that bell curve is only going to drop significantly as you see there are no skill gap within that. And that's
Yeah.
what I think. I like that point you brought up because it really makes a good uh, argument for why don't they have something similar to an MMO where, hey, from level 1 to 20, it's only level 1 through 20 that are within this area and this area alone. Or even
Yeah.
segmenting the maps as a specific level area where typically level this through this is in this specific map. But
Yeah.
to its credit as well, a lot of people within the community also like the idea that there is no skill-based matchmaking at all. That it's, hey, I'm a level 5 and I took out a level 40. I got his gear. Sick,
Yeah.
man. Like now I get all of his stuff and I can go with it, like you were saying as well. So there's a lot of different takes that within the community that I've heard. And I think it's very, I'm just curious what the longevity of the game will be once full release actually happens and you still have those consistent wipes. What will it look like? Will they
Yeah.
change something up to really help the community? What is their goal? Do they want to capture a large player base, or do they want to keep it more of that niche, smaller community? Which, and I'm saying smaller community in regards to the bigger AAA FPS giants that we know, because they're
Yeah.
obviously trying to grab that large community. So
Yeah.
I don't
No,
know.
yeah, I'm not sure. And I think what I'm hopeful for is they do add a little bit of that segmentation. And even if you look at some of these trends towards taking these PC games and eventually having them on a console, uh, that's another thing I think of, because you have to drop some of that extracurricular stuff to be able to go over to console. But utilize an example like having that lower person go and get the higher level kill. I think that even too is just an odd byproduct of the way the community is. It's a game that's almost made exclusively for creators. It's not made for a person that's not a creator. Like, it makes for awesome content to watch playing. It's one of the few games I actually believe makes sense to watch other people play. Like, if you don't understand streaming at all and that's not your thing, something like Escape from Tarkov is one of the few games where it makes sense, because it's the closest game to literally watching somebody in like the Hunger Games. Because it's pure to a degree. It has a lot of these different elements, but those same things are why you don't go volunteer for the Hunger Games. Um, so again, what is that from a monetization from the developer? How on earth do they grow when they actually launch and maintain, especially since it's not going to be a subscription based game? I mean, I'm sure like you, like I bought the $119 whatever, because if I'm going to play, I want all the bells and whistles, but I don't need to pay one time. And there's no way in heck an indie developer is going to be able to justify anytime in the next 2 years charging me more money, or you more money that bought that to play. So, but again, something to look forward to. And speaking of stuff to look forward to, this is our 10th episode, obviously, season 1. We put this together. You and I had talked, but doing something interesting, partially to kind of step a little bit outside of the more narrowly focused work that each of us does individually, and find a fun space to chat about some different topics, hopefully meet some cool people, and do some cool stuff. And you're going to wrap up this season here after this episode. So again, thanks everybody for tuning in. And we're working on getting season 2 squared away with a few adaptations. I think probably the main ones are, we've done a lot this season with kind of understanding the arcs and how we kind of go through topics. So yes, you'll still get the wandering and meandering, philosophical approaches from both of us, and opinions, which we've gotten tons of positive feedback on. So thank you on that. Um, but we want to be more deliberate, and I think a lot of podcasters and creators understand this over time. How do we, walk in with some interesting topics, interact with the community more, um, more from a how can we have more thought provoking pieces of content that will solicit feedback that can then drive future episodes. And then the other piece both of us are excited about is, in the next season, finding opportunities to bring in and interview people in some of these places, whether it's technology, generally entertainment, gaming, and talk the same way about some of the same stuff, but have the insider, the inside baseball version of that particular area. So we don't have the exact launch date. We're working on a bunch of things behind the scenes, and both of us are, and in the near term, in the middle of some moves. It'll probably be late November, early December, certainly by the end of the year. But we're excited about that. But what extra commentary and observations do you want to look back on, and then also look forward to?
I'm really looking forward to, bringing in some people that can give either their expertise or their opinions, that maybe stepping outside of our box and being able to get some other opinions. Cause I think you and I both have each other kind of figured out on the different, things that make us tick. So I think it'll be great to get, some other perspectives that are coming in. And not only that, but I highly encourage everybody to, drop comments below, and or even timestamps on things that you found interesting. Just let us know what your thoughts are on specific segments alone, because even the feedback we've been getting, people are really enjoying it. But I would love to get some commentary going between, people within the community, just so that they can, bounce ideas back off of us, and then maybe make us think a little differently on the topics that we're talking about within the podcast as well. So I think that's all I really have to say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even take it a step further. One of the things too that we've been talking about is, we're going to have what should still be a weekly podcast. That's the intent. We want to work into where probably 20 to 25% either are live or have a live element into it to be able to interact. But then the other piece is coming up with a secondary, like quick hitting piece of content where maybe we're having a 1 minute or 5 minute thing also maybe once or twice a week. So keeping those things in mind, that's where the feedback is huge. Even if it's, hey Glenn, you talk too much, or Jared, you keep saying Glenn has good points and he doesn't. That both are appreciated, because it both of us are confident enough in what we do. We enjoy speaking. We wouldn't do this. We ruminate on this stuff anyways, and so whether or not it's being recorded doesn't matter. We're going to have these conversations. And they're liked enough. But being able to understand the nuance of, if you're watching this or you listen to it and you're saying, okay, yeah, I like when you go to this level. I like when you talk about again, the nuance or the philosophy behind something, but I don't really care about your actual opinion on the gameplay unless you do. So that type of stuff is absolutely huge. We welcome it, and anybody that takes the time to do that, even if it's something you don't like, please share it, because again, we're going to do this because we love it. But the fact is, if you're taking the time to listen to us, we want to make sure that within what we are driven to do, and the purpose of what we're trying to do, that we can keep you entertained, have some fun, and utilize that to then drive future content and future guests.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Right on. Well, hey, I think this is we got a little bit of extra time here. We were able to chat with everybody. One kind of closing thing, just a reminder to everybody, and we'll have more of these partners coming up. But Gunner Glass has always been good to us, as well as the communities we're a part of. If you go to gunner.com, you use code BRUTE, BRUTE, you get 15% off, which it's one of the highest discounts from any of the influencers. So go use that. But then also on top of it, they give 10% donation to OSD. Plenty of different models. Also, a bunch of models have launched for kids. So they actually have a children's line that's a little bit smaller for their smaller faces. Check them out. Again, 15% off gunner.com. Use code BRUTE. That's Brute. And check them out. So we'll drop some links there in the bottom, some codes at the bottom. But until then, I just want to, again, one last time, say thank you to everybody for tuning in to season 1 and all 10 of our episodes of the Redacted podcast. And we shall catch you here very soon with season 2.
Thanks, everybody.